You know those leaders who talk a big game about virtue and goodness, but somehow leave a trail of destruction in their wake? It's a puzzle, right? Well, in this explainer, we're going to dive deep into the psychology behind that paradox, and we're going to explore a really fascinating concept called malignant narcissism.
This quote from M. Scott Pac-Man, it just cuts right to the chase. It suggests that the real damage isn't done by people who are wrestling with their doubts, but by the ones who are so convinced of their own goodness that they refuse to even look in the mirror. So, that leads us to the big question we're tackling today. Are these people in on the act? I mean, are they aware of their own hypocrisy? Are they just master manipulators? Or, and this is the scary part, have they actually managed to fool themselves too? Let's dig in.
Okay, first things first. Before we can go any further, we have to get on the same page about what we even mean by the word evil in a psychological sense. It's a heavy word, so let's look at the specific definition we'll be working with.
So, the psychiatrist M. Scott Peck gives us this really specific take. For him, evil isn't just about physical violence. It's any force that's fundamentally against life. And that includes not just, killing people, but killing the human spirit. Crushing someone's independence, their spark, their will to grow. And this quote from Solzhenitsyn just nails a crucial point. This isn't some conversation about a monstrous other out there. The potential for this kind of evil, the kind that crushes liveliness, exists inside every single one of us. And that makes understanding it not just some academic thing, but something that's actually deeply personal.
So, if we all have this potential within us, what happens when it gets tangled up with a very specific and very dangerous personality type? That brings us to the core of our topic today, malignant narcissism.
Now, this is a really, really important distinction. We tend to think evil equals psychopathy, someone with no moral compass whatsoever. But Peck argues that malignant narcissists might actually be responsible for more of the world's evil. The key difference isn't a lack of morality. It's a powerful, active, and stubborn refusal to see their own wrongdoing.
So what exactly is it? Well, it's this extreme need to see yourself and be seen by others as morally perfect. The key thing to understand is that the goal isn't actually to be good. The goal is to protect the image of being good, no matter what it takes. Their whole identity is basically a lie they tell themselves.
And where does all this come from? You might think it's from a place of strength or genuine superiority, but it's the total opposite. At the very bottom of it all is this deep, chronic, and terrifying fear of being seen as flawed or inadequate. That whole perfect persona, it's just a suit of armor hiding that terror.
This chart really breaks it down. Look, when a psychologically healthy person messes up, their conscience kicks in, right? You feel guilty, you feel remorse, you try to make it right. But the malignant narcissist has this way of completely short-circuiting that process. They use layers and layers of self-deception to bypass their conscience, which allows them to keep believing they're the good guy no matter how much damage they cause.
So that raises a huge question. If they can't admit to having any flaws, where do all those flaws go? Well, that brings us to the main tool in their psychological toolkit, the weapon they use to maintain this perfect self-image, scapegoating.
The engine that makes scapegoating run is a defense mechanism called projection. It's a completely unconscious process where they take all the ugly parts of themselves they can't stand, their own greed, their own cruelty, their own failures, and they just kind of throw them onto someone else. They make other people the container for their own darkness.
And this whole destructive thing happens in 4 basic steps. First, it starts with a flaw inside them that they absolutely cannot face. Second, without even realizing it, they project that flaw onto a target. Third, their whole perception shifts. They genuinely start to see that other person as the source of all the problems. And finally, and this is the craziest part, they attack that person in a twisted attempt to destroy the evil that was actually inside them the whole time.
And here is the absolute kicker, the really chilling paradox. They cause so much destruction not because they're embracing evil, but because, in their own minds, they are fighting it. The problem is, as Peck says, they've just completely misplaced where that evil is. Instead of looking in the mirror, they're looking out the window, seeing a world full of enemies that they believe must be destroyed. Okay, so it would be really easy to just sit back and point fingers at them, right? But here's where this whole topic gets a little uncomfortable and where the real work begins. We have to be willing to turn that lens away from others and point it right back at ourselves. Peck forces us to ask this incredibly important question. In the very act of calling someone else evil, could I be falling into the exact same trap? Could I be scapegoating them to avoid my own flaws?
It's a huge warning to move forward with a lot of humility and some serious self-reflection. So what's the way out of this trap? Well, the famous psychologist Carl Jung kind of points the way. It all comes down to awareness. The moment we can recognize our own capacity for the very things we hate in other people, we can start to take those projections back. We stop seeing monsters everywhere out there, and we start to get honest about the shadows within ourselves.
And when you do this work, something really amazing happens. There are two huge payoffs. First, you're obviously way less likely to project your own stuff onto other people. But second, and this is what I find so fascinating, by understanding the potential for darkness in yourself, you develop this kind of second sight. You get this instinct for recognizing it in others. Not as some cartoon bad guy, but in the subtle, real ways it shows up.
All right, so if we've done some of that internal work and we're armed with this self-awareness, how do we actually deal with this kind of behavior when we see it out in the world? Let's get into our final section, how to fight these lies with simple truth.
This quote from Eric Fromm perfectly explains why malignant narcissists are so often successful. We expect evil to look evil, to have horns and a pitchfork. But their brand of evil is wrapped in a cloak of righteousness and good intentions, and that makes it incredibly hard for most people to even see what's really going on.
When you boil it all down, their greatest weapon isn't their own strength. It's our collective denial, our unwillingness to believe that someone who seems so good and so right could actually be so destructive. That's the very thing that gives them power. Public naivety is the soil where their influence grows.
So what's the antidote? How do you fight back? Well, it's not about meeting their hate with more hate. That just plays into their game and makes you an easy target. The real strategy is to be relentless with the truth. Call out the lies, expose the hypocrisy, shine a bright, unwavering light on every single contradiction until that carefully built facade just collapses under its own weight.
And we'll leave it with this final powerful idea from Pick. The one thing this kind of psychology absolutely cannot stand is the light. They need the shadows of lies and self-deception to survive. But the light of scrutiny, the light of truth, that's what exposes them. It's a powerful reminder that in this fight, transparency and truth really are our greatest weapons.